now, don't I? There we go.
I preached a sermon on will we know one another when we die, and or will we know one another in heaven? And I used that sermon kind of as a springboard to get our minds thinking about our overall topic, which is what happens when we die. And that's what we're going to look at. And there are a number of different ideas about what happens, particularly to the child of God when they die. All right, and so I have some that are written down, and I mentioned one specifically that we were going to study, and you probably don't remember it because probably none of you have ever heard that doctrine before. But let me just ask you, what do many people in the religious world believe happens to the Christian at the point of death? Go directly to heaven. All right, and I'm going to put this as number 2 because it's number 2 on my list. I couldn't put it number 1 because I knew that was what everybody was going to say. All right? But because I'm going to put the one we mentioned a couple of weeks ago. So on your notebook. By the way, this is far and away the most popular or most taught doctrine about what happens at death, is that the child of God, the Christian, goes directly to heaven. All right? What's something else that people might?
Well, they think there's a consciousness, and they see what goes on down in there.
All right, that there is a and that could be tied to this as well. That people on the other side can see what's going on here.
Yeah.
All right. And we'll just add this. Although this is really probably tied somewhat to these two. All right. Now, does anybody remember what I mentioned 2 weeks ago?
Sleep.
Say it again. Sleep. And that's where we'll start our study tonight, is the doctrine known as soul sleeping. All right. Now, aside from those things, what else is there? Well, yeah, but not Bible believers. Yeah. Some people believe nothing happens. Like Rover, just dead all over. All right, for example, what do we believe?
They go to a place of waiting until it get big judgment.
All right, we'll call it intermediate. An intermediate or place of waiting. All right? And what is this place? For the Christian, it's sometimes described as Abraham's bosom, but it's also described in other words. But I mean, what is the whole place?
Hades.
Say it, Bobby. Hades. All right? And then there's one other doctrine that I did not mention 2 weeks ago, but I'm going to mention it, and it's going to be the last thing that we discuss. And there's 2 ideas. One is the doctrine of universalism. All right? By its name, what do you think that means? What does universalism mean?
All inclusive.
Everybody goes to heaven. That's right. Everybody's going to make it. I noticed a few years ago that one of my friends from Freed-Hardeman had embraced universalism. And it just absolutely blew me away. Blew me away. All right? And then there is, lastly, what is known as annihilationism. All right, is anybody familiar with the concept of the doctrine of annihilationism? All right, annihilationism is only generally believed by two religious groups, both of which are believed to be somewhat cult-like in their organization and practice, and those are the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Seventh-day Adventists. All right? And annihilationism is the doctrine that if you're not saved, God's just going to wipe you out. There'll be there's no, in other words, annihilationism is essentially the doctrine of no hell. All right? So if we were going to summarize annihilationism, it would be no hell for the wicked. Okay? No hell for the wicked. Only basically a cessation of existence. You just cease to exist in any shape, form, or fashion. All right, the doctrine that we're going to look at tonight is the doctrine of soul sleeping, which is that the soul departs the body. The soul departs the body, but sleeps, is unconscious until the judgment, or until the resurrection and judgment. All right? Now, other than going directly to and I probably should have done this, I probably should have went directly to the Jehovah's Witness website. They have an official web page. But I did find some sites that, and by the way, just to show you what search did you do? What search did you do? Let me get up here at the top. I just simply typed in soul sleep biblical, because I was going to type soul sleeping, and when I got to soul sleep, you know how sometimes it'll finish it for you, and so soul sleep biblical came up. And I just clicked on that, and I got basically everything that I wanted to get to. You see, I just went to a lot of these. All of these sites, all right, all of these sites that we're going to look at do not believe in soul sleeping, but they do present the arguments of the soul sleeping doctrine. So, in other words, they give us the verses that we're looking for. All right, now this is a really good site, by the way, Blue Letter Bible. Blue Letter Bible is a very good resource for commentaries. I mean, there's just a lot of good stuff there, and I would recommend it. If you don't have much in your library, that you can use Blue Letter Bible, and a lot of the links there across the top that you can see. All right, but it gives a very good definition of soul sleep. And it says the doctrine of soul sleep. Trying to make it a little bit bigger. Maybe you can see it. The doctrine of soul sleep teaches that upon death, the soul of each person, believer and unbeliever alike, sleeps until the resurrection and judgment. Though all people will be raised from the dead, the condition of humans between death and resurrection is one of unconsciousness. The soul is alive but unconscious, awaiting the time of the end. According to this teaching, when the person dies, they totally cease to exist. Eventually, each soul will be awakened to resurrection and then to judgment. Now, let me just add this. Those who believe in soul sleeping also believe in annihilationism. All right? These two doctrines are linked. Jehovah's Witnesses teach soul sleeping. Jehovah's Witnesses teach annihilationism. Seventh-day Adventists teach soul sleeping. Seventh-day Adventists also teach annihilationism. All right? And so these two doctrines are linked according to the two prominent groups that teach them. Now, having said that, this doctrine of soul sleeping and annihilationism have been embraced by some in the brotherhood. and particularly the doctrine of annihilationism or the doctrine of no hell. When I was a kid, when I was a child, we lived in St. Louis. We moved from St. Louis when I was about 6 years old. But we worshiped at the Kirkwood Church of Christ in Kirkwood, Missouri, just outside of St. Louis, not far from where Rhonda grew up, or where her parents live now. And the preacher at that congregation was a man by the name of Edward Fudge. And some of you that have been around this area long enough probably know the name Benny Lee Fudge. Benny Lee Fudge was one of the ramrods at the beginning of the anti-movement, the non-institutional movement. And Ed Fudge was his son. And Ed Fudge embraced the non-institutional movement. And we went to a non-institutional church at that time. Not because we believed it, but because we couldn't find a faithful church within reasonable driving distance. Ed Fudge eventually not only left the non-institutional movement, he went as far to the other side of the religious spectrum as you could go. The church where he served as an elder had women elders, women preachers, the whole 9 yards. He wrote a book in 1982 called The Fire That Consumes. The Fire That Consumes. And in that book, he took the Jehovah's Witness position on hell. No hell for the wicked. It's also my understanding, many of you may have read books in time past by F. LaGard Smith. He wrote a number of excellent books in the 80s and 90s on moral issues such as abortion and other things. And he's a sharp guy. At one time, a law professor at Pepperdine University. But LaGard Smith also embraced the no hell position. And there is an increasing number of top-notch, well-known evangelical writers who have embraced the no hell position, and many of our people are being influenced by that. And so, I'm just telling you this to let you know that we're not studying this just because Jehovah's Witnesses believe it or Seventh-day Adventists believe it. There's some of our brethren that are beginning to deny the doctrine of hell. And so this is a good definition, and this again is from the Blue Letter Bible, and says, here are the arguments. And I think this guy does a good job of representing where these things start. That death is called sleep. The Bible speaks of death as sleep. Well, we know it does. He notes Acts 7 and verse 60. Stephen, when he was being stoned, it says, when he had said this, he fell asleep. Well, we all know what that means, right? He died. What did Jesus say? Our friend Lazarus sleeps. And Thomas said, well, if he sleeps, that's a good thing. Maybe he'll get better. And then Jesus said, Lazarus is dead. All right? 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. Those who sleep in Christ. All right? It's not those who are literally sleeping. What are they? They're dead. They've died. But they died in Christ. And so the Bible does speak of death as sleep. But it is a leap of indefensible proportions to say that just because the Bible speaks of death as being sleep, that's the same as those that are dead being unconscious. In other words, those two things just don't logically connect or follow. All right? Now, let me move down here if I can. Here's a passage taken from Psalm 17:15. We're going to write that. We're going to want to write that on our notebook. All right, next to our soul sleeping. We're going to need to examine Psalm 17:15 as one of the passages. We're not going to deal with Acts 7 and verse 60 because we know what that says. We understand the concept of death being sleep. But David says, as for me, I shall behold your face in righteousness. When I awake, I shall be satisfied beholding your likeness. All right, so it sounds like David's talking about he's going to be asleep for a while. And he's going to be awake. All right, so, there's a verse that... Now, I never have understood this one. that says that soul sleep assumes that a physical organism is necessary for consciousness, that a person does not have a soul, they are a soul, and that the soul cannot be a soul unless it's in a body. And if you take the soul out of the body, then it can't be a soul anymore. All right? Actually, the very opposite of that is true. The body cannot live without a soul. It's not that the soul can't live without a body, it's the body can't live without a soul. And so this argument is exactly backwards. But it says, for what happens to the sons of men also happens to beasts. One thing befalls them. As one dies, so dies the other. Surely they all have one breath. Humans have no advantages over beasts, for all is vanity. All go to one place. All are from dust, and all return to dust. Ecclesiastes 9, verses 19 and 20. We're going to need to examine that text. So write down Ecclesiastes 3. Ecclesiastes 3, 19 and 20. And the argument would be that man and beast are the same. All right. Making our way down. Psalm 6 and verse 5. That the dead do not know anything. And also Ecclesiastes chapter 9 verses 5. Let's see. We're going to say 5 to 10. Okay? Verse 10 is the verse that's here. It says, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might, for in the grave where you're going, there's neither work, nor planning, nor knowledge, nor wisdom. All right? So Ecclesiastes 9, 5 to 10. And then we'll add this last passage on Psalm 115 and verse 17. All right. Now here's a question. Verse in number 4 is that no resuscitated person related what they saw. All right. And this seems to be a reasonable argument. I mean, we're not just going to dismiss these things out of hand. All right. But that's, and we'll call it this way: no person resurrected spoke of what he saw. All right? That's true, right? We don't hear anything from Lazarus, Jairus' daughter, Dorcas. I mean, there are a number of people, the young man that Jesus raised, basically out of his casket as they were carrying him down the street. I mean, nobody related anything of what they saw. All right?
When the Spirit of the Old Testament was brought, he said, why did you, the way it stated in the Scripture was like, why are you bothering me for my sleep? Would almost be an argument.
Yeah. Samuel said, why have you disquieted me and brought me to this place?
Right, disquiet.
You disturbed me. Why did you disturb me?
What about the guy that was being burned and tormented in the flame? He bring a drop of water and put on his tongue.
Well, you're right. But we're not answering the argument yet, Walter. We're just finding out what they are.
Oh, okay.
Always count on Walter to get ahead of him. 21 and a half years, Walter. And some things never change.
Well, you think about these things that run across your mind.
You're right. Well, they should. You're right. They should. All right. I had never heard this one. That the thief on the cross is used as an argument about soul sleep. And that, but it says, assuredly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. But the soul sleepers put a comma after the word today. In other words, I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. In other words, the word today is what he's saying today and not what's going to happen today. Now, one thing we need to remember, there is no punctuation in the Greek language. So any and all punctuation that is added by men. But there's no justification to add that comma right there. All right. So we're not even going to talk about that. But it just shows you to the extent that people will go to teach their error. Now, this is from Focus on the Family. Now this doctrine, well, I don't need to go through this one because this doctrine is actually teaching that people go directly to heaven when they die, and that's not our emphasis. Where does the Bible teach about soul sleep? This is trying to answer it, and it's also teaching that people go directly to heaven when they die. You go here. Now this is talking about the origin of the doctrine of soul sleeping. I have never heard this. But that somebody named Arnobius of Sicca wrote a book in 305 A.D. that said the soul does not exist after death unless God grants it grace, and that souls not under God's grace are annihilated in the fires of hell. And this doctrine just kind of fell off. By the way, this was never widely believed. But it was reestablished in 1841 by a Methodist by the name of George Storrs. Now, I did not know this until doing this research. Storrs is actually the father of what was known as the Millerite movement. And the Millerite movement was the movement of William Miller. William Miller taught that there was going to be the second coming in October of 1842. And his followers sold everything that they had in preparation for the Lord to come back in October of 1842. Well, as we all know, it didn't happen. Well, then Miller said, well, he miscalculated. It's going to be October of 1843. And we know what happened in October of 1843. November came after it. And it didn't happen again. This was known as the Great Disappointment. This event, series of events, was called the Great Disappointment. Now, Miller just disappeared off the face of the map, which I would too if I'd done what he did. You know, and then people ended up in the shape they were in because of me. But the leaders within that movement held on to some of these doctrines that had been begun by Storrs. And the two movements that grew out of the Great Disappointment were the Seventh-day Adventists and the Jehovah's Witnesses. These two groups find their origins in what we call the Millerites and the Great Disappointment of 1842 to 1844. All right, so we learned a little bit. This is from the website Patheos, which is another pretty good resource. And so it just tells us a little bit about the origin of this doctrine. I didn't know anybody taught it before the Millerites. And this is a rebuttal, but I was thinking, just to show you that Ecclesiastes 9 verse 5, we included that in the passage of Ecclesiastes 9 verse 10 that I mentioned a minute ago. The living know that they will die, but the dead do not know anything, nor do they have any longer a reward, for their memory is forgotten. And in Ecclesiastes 12 and verse 7, the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. And so, but we have that passage, Ecclesiastes 9, included there. So there are the passages and the basic arguments that we will examine. Now, next Sunday night is singing night. I'll be holding a meeting in Missouri if the Lord wills. So next Sunday night, but you can do some research on these texts of Scripture which are Psalm 17, 15, Ecclesiastes 3, 19 and 20, and then Psalm 6 and verse 5, Ecclesiastes 9, 5 to 10, and Psalm 115 and verse 17. Now, before I turn you loose, what would be a good practice if I'm going to study these verses that are being offered in defense of soul sleeping? What would be a good thing for me to do with these verses? Read them, that's right. But read them what? Read them what? Read them in their context. Read the passages in their context. Rather than just allowing this one verse to be pulled out and used to teach us doctrine, read the verse before and the verse after. Right? For example, we've got 6 verses out of Ecclesiastes 9. You know what would be a good idea? Read all of Ecclesiastes 9. And also, understand what is the context of the entire book of Ecclesiastes. Because we have 2 passages, Ecclesiastes 3, 19 and 20, Ecclesiastes 9, 5 to 10. The key to understanding the overall context of the book is found in the first 3 chapters. The first 3 chapters. And then it's concluded at the end of the last chapter. And so we want to read these verses in their context. What is the 115th Psalm all about? Rather than just what is verse 17 about, what is the 115th Psalm about? Because, one thing that is unique about the chapters in the Psalms is each one stands alone in its context because each is an individual psalm. It's not like, you can't just read Matthew 8. Because Matthew 8 and Matthew 9 are connected to one another. You see what I'm saying? Other chapters of the Bible are different, and Psalms is unique in that every chapter is a stand-alone chapter. The chapter before it doesn't have really anything to do, and the chapter after doesn't necessarily have anything to do with it. And so we can read Psalm 115, read it carefully. What is the psalmist trying to say throughout the course of this chapter? All right? And also the same would be said for Psalm 6. All right, so as you do your reading, your preparations, let's consider all of these individual chapters, particularly the ones in the Psalms, in their context, and include our study of Ecclesiastes in the overall context of the book. Then that'll help us. That'll help us. All right. Any questions about any of this? Now, we're going to start with the soul sleeping, and if the Lord wills, before we're done, we'll deal with all these, and probably deal with number 4 last, because number 4 is the truth. All right, number four is what the Bible teaches. All right, any questions or thoughts?